All right, guys. As promised, we thought we would do a video about Darin.
A little later than expected.
Yeah, a lot later than expected. But since we're waiting on solenoids today, we thought today would be a good day for it. It's going to be a 3-part section. It's just a lot of information. Had some anxiety about doing it because you don't want to bring up a lot of history of things that you've been through because it kind of creates more stress than it has. So I think we'll kind of just go through the first 5 years first. There's a lot of info in that, and CJ's going to kind of let me do the running because I remember the most with the conversation, and he'll kind of just chime in when he remembers or he has input on it. So we've been together actually today, 23 years. It's our anniversary. Woohoo!
Yay!
Such an exciting day. And to kind of keep things focused on Darin and his story, I'm not one for sugarcoating, but there are some things that I'm going to kind of tread lightly on here. I've done a lot of growing as a person in the past few years, and there's some things that just don't need to waste energy on it. So there are some things that I'll just kind of touch lightly on.
Then why even touch on it? I mean, realistically, why even bring shit up?
Because I don't want to go bashing somebody. It's not right. So
that's what I'm saying. Why bring it up?
Because I just am.
Okay.
So, we were together a full year before we got pregnant with Darin. During that year, there was a period where I thought that I was going to leave CJ. And same with him, just because we were young. What?
Is that when the boyfriend got out of jail?
Something like that. But it wasn't him, it was me. So, in my defense, CJ had a lot of baggage. There were a lot of people around pulling him away from me for various reasons. So there were a lot of people telling him things about me, and it was a lot. So I didn't know if I wanted to deal with it, and I had a decision to make, and so did he. And I lived a lot of life in between the age of 12 and 18, and there were certain things I was done with, and he was still trying to figure out who he was. So we were, even though I know I said in a previous video that I brought him home and he never left, there was a period before we had Darin where we weren't living together. We were still seeing each other, but we weren't living together. So I know all the folks at home sitting from the past eating their popcorn probably had something to say about that. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
Good times.
Yeah. Lots of good times. So with that being said, we'll kind of get into Darin and let you know his life story and how it came about and how we manage things now. So, like I said, CJ and I weren't together when I actually found out I was pregnant with Darin. He had moved in with some friends, and I was living at the place that my parents had left me on my family's property, not my parents' property, but my uncle's property. I was living there when I found out that I got pregnant with Darin. I was about 3 months pregnant, and I started having some spotting, some bleeding, so I went to the emergency room. And the doctors told me, you know, you're going to lose this baby. You're not going to be able to carry it to term, so you need to just kind of deal with that. And sent me home. CJ had come to the hospital to see me. He was concerned about what was going on. So he came home with me that night, and we kind of, you know, just see how things went. And I ended up not losing the baby, obviously. But it was scary.
Especially as young.
Yeah.
Parents.
Young, gonna be parents. Not sure if we were gonna be together or not. How that was all gonna work, what we were gonna do. A lot of responsibility and things like that.
And when I was younger, I had zero focus on a path of life. Like, I just lived day to day.
Yeah, and
I had no idea where I was going.
And I kind of knew where I wanted to go.
And she knew where she already wanted to be and was supposed to be in her life schedule.
So we kind of deferred on that for a little bit. But he ended up moving back in, and we kind of worked things out for a while. And we went in to find out if we were having a boy or girl for that doctor's visit. CJ's mom actually came with us for that visit. So we went into the doctor's, and the doctor seen something on the ultrasound, and they weren't sure because back then technology wasn't as savvy as it is now. They said it looked like cysts or holes in his bowel or his kidney. They weren't really sure which one, but everything else looked okay. I had a little bit more fluid than normal people have around the sac of the baby. And they wanted to send me up to a major hospital in Columbus for more extensive ultrasounds. So the pregnancy continued with that. I would go up every month for extensive ultrasounds just to make sure everything was okay. And they determined it was the kidney, it wasn't the bowel, and it was full of cysts. And once we had the baby, that we would kind of get things checked out more. They did still note, and they measured my fluid. I still had a lot more fluid than normal. They didn't say it was a concern, but there was more fluid than there was normal. Now, during my pregnancy, I did smoke. I was a smoker then. I'm not now. I didn't smoke heavily. There were no drugs involved when I was pregnant with Darin. I know some people that knew me when I was younger probably speculated that. But there was not.
There was no drugs for a long time before that.
Yeah.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
When we got together, there was really no drugs.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know people that knew me when I was younger probably said something about that, and there just wasn't. So we had the extensive ultrasounds done, and then I was 32 weeks pregnant, and on Labor Day, I went into labor. My water broke, standing in the hallway. CJ was at work at the time. He was working in scaffolding in downtown Columbus, I think it was. I was actually in medical assisting college. I was trying to get my associate's degree in medical assisting so I could go to work after, and kind of start my career path. So my mom and sister came out and drove me up to the hospital. CJ met us there, and the rest of the families were there. Labor and delivery went fine. Just amazing to CJ. But I did still have all that fluid, and in 4 hours with no epidural, Darin was born. He was a little small because he was at 32 weeks, nothing abnormally small, but for some reason I remember it like it was yesterday. When the nurse handed me Darin, I noticed that one of his nostrils was bigger than the other one. They say a mom just knows. Well, I knew something was going to be different at that point when they handed him to me. So they sent us home. We had the regular hospital stay. There was a problem with Darin's circumcision. I don't remember what the problem was, but it resulted in us having to go back and get it redone. So that's kind of where we went to. We left the hospital on regular time. We had a nurse come out to the home, check us. Everything was fine. I did feed Darin baby formula. He was not a breastfed baby. So we went home and tried to, start living life as young parents. So, like I said, we brought Darin home, and the nurse came out to visit, no issues there. But looking back on it now, I did notice that Darin had a lot of diarrhea when he was younger. So much that it scorched his skin, and he had real bad diaper rash. I wish, looking back now, that it was an issue that I would have, addressed sooner. But it did clear up, and his skin cleared up. So, I didn't think it was a big deal. So life kind of went on for us for the next few months. We thought everything was normal. I finished college, graduated there, went to go, start working, and CJ was working as well. We didn't really have a plan in place for childcare. So my sister kind of helped out. She also found out she was pregnant at the time. So she agreed to watch Darin until she had her baby, but she actually lived quite a ways on the other side of town and away from where I was working at. So I was traveling quite a bit for her to watch Darin. And then my mom would also watch Darin sometimes. So I think Darin was about 3 or 4 months old when, you know, we started noticing that he wasn't sleeping very well. He would just, you know, cry and be upset, and we kind of just thought it was teething. And we kept asking the doctors, you know, is this normal? And they kept telling us, yes, he's just teething, or he was born early, you know, this is just colic, or this is that. Started noticing he wasn't meeting his milestones, like rolling over like he was supposed to. I could run a vacuum cleaner dang near next to his head and he wouldn't even flinch. So that was kind of like, oh, okay, I don't think that's right, you know, type of thing. But then it got so bad where, you know, Darin wasn't sleeping at all. I would have to carry him and he'd be gassy. So then again, they scream and cry. And I'm like, something's not right here. This isn't teething. So they changed his formula again. And it constipated him. It still didn't work. We were still screaming. He was still screaming all night and he wasn't sleeping. So
all night and all day.
All night and all day.
All day, all night.
And I walked him the whole time. I hardly ever put him down. So I know people had said that at one point was trying to convince CJ that I was anorexic and I didn't eat. Oh, I ate plenty. It's just I was burning off calories like crazy because I was walking Darin all the time. So with that, we kept going to the doctor for answers. Doctors didn't have no answers. So we started going to emergency room for answers.
Children's.
We go to Children's. Children's didn't know what to do. We go to, you know, the local hospitals. They didn't know what to do. At one point, we were at Children's and they admitted him for it. They called it unconsolable crying. Nothing.
And it also implied that it was along the lines of like we were abusing him or something. Didn't they?
Yeah. And then the genetics. They referred us to genetics. So we had Darin's genetics tested. I think he was about a year old. And they came back with a chromosome disorder. It's called chromosome ring 22 deletion 13.3. It's actually 2 different disorders. The ring 22 is one disorder and the deletion 13.3 is another disorder. So I'm not a scientist or medical person as far as doctor, a nurse, I know.
You're a medical person.
So the best way I could explain it to viewers at home like this is that you, on your 22 chromosome, it looks, if you was to look at it on a piece of paper with you know, look at it, you would see like 2 sticks. And that's your 22nd chromosome is 2 sticks. Well, what happened with Darin is that information from one of the sticks went away. And then they stuck together. So the part that went away is the deletion. And then it stuck together, so it formed a ring. So I started doing tons of research. The research said that if you just had the ring, not so bad. If you had both, that was kind of more severe. So I spent a lot of time doing more research. All while Darin was still crying and screaming. And we were still going in and out of the doctor. So we were about like at a year and a half at this point, and no really answers. I mean, when we went in and they told us it was a chromosome disorder, you know, the only thing we had ever heard of was Down syndrome or something like that. Autism wasn't big then, or any other disorders. So
doctors didn't know anything about it.
They didn't know anything. There was maybe 3 other people, like Ohio, Kentucky, kids that had it. And so they sent me home with this kid and couldn't tell me anything about him or what was going, you know, what the future was going to hold. So I had to do all the digging on my own. All right, so at this point, we're about a year and a half in, like I said, with Darin, and Darin gets admitted to Children's again. This time, had wonderful doctors. The doctor's like, you know, I don't know what it is. Something's obviously not right. And when we went to be discharged, she even told me, if you figure out what it is, come back and let me know so I'm educated so I can help other people. She believed in me. She believed us. And as before, nobody else believed us. But once Darin got the chromosome disorder diagnosis, it was, oh, your kid's going to be special needs. Just take them home and deal with them. And that's kind of what children's was then. And I was like, okay, if you don't have a gunshot wound or you don't have cancer, you don't get answers. That's the way it was 20 years ago for us. It might not have been for everybody, but for us, that's how it was.
Pretty much.
So luckily, you know, my mom was helping out a lot. My sister had a baby. My mom was there a lot in the beginning. Every time I couldn't handle it or I needed to go to the grocery store, she would come because CJ was busy working. Because I had to quit my job so I could stay home with Darin because nobody could watch him. He would cry all the time and scream. And you know, realistically, nobody, a sane person could not handle that. But for some reason...
She fucking insane.
I kind of look back on my life and I was prepared my whole life for this, is how I felt. When I was born, I was not supposed to be able to walk. My hip was dislocated. And back in those days, it wasn't a thing that they could fix, I guess. It was so bad. It's from what my mom had told me. So I feel like that being fixed and me being able to walk and stuff like that was preparing me for life with Darin. When I was younger, I could always connect with special needs kids a lot better than anybody else could. So again, I felt like God was preparing me to have Darin and to live life with Darin. So that's just kind of how I felt, and I went at it like that. 80% of people that are married with special needs kids do get divorced. So the fact that CJ and I kind of made it through all of it and are still together today, it kind of says something, I guess, for us. We have to remind ourselves of that because it was not easy, you know, being at home, walking him, me not sleeping, him not sleeping. I would call and I'd yell at CJ because he wasn't there. And I would try not to cry. I resented him a lot for that. And as I gotten older, I realized that he was doing the best that he could to cope. And he's not the same person as me. So he copes differently. And I had a lot of guilt for putting him through that because he was hurting too. And it wasn't fair. But it's just something that happens. So, God bless my mother. She ordered some off-the-wall tests from online. It wasn't FDA approved yet. It was a hair sample test. And I figured at this point, why not? You know, what do we got to lose? The doctors don't have no answers. Nobody else has any answers. So, we took Darin's hair sample. Okay, so we got the hair sample test. We did that. It came back that Darin had all kinds of toxins in his system. And we're like, well, how did he get all these toxins in his system? So we took it to Children's again, and they said they wouldn't look at it because it wasn't FDA approved yet. Luckily, this test said that, you know, if you needed a referral to a doctor, they would give you one. So we called the place that manufactured the test, and they sent us to a doctor in Pickerington, Ohio. And that was the biggest blessing that we ever had. Because that doctor's been with us now for 21 years and he's done tremendous help with Darin. So all this time that we're...
Been 21 years?
Yeah. I'm sorry, 19 years.
Yeah.
Because we started seeing him when Darin was 2 at this point. During this point, Darin was 2. When we got the referral for the doctor, it's hard to keep track of all of this.
Jessica.
he's Puerto Rican. So CJ likes how he says my name. during the 2 years, Darin was 2, he still wasn't meeting milestones. He wasn't sitting up. He would just lay. We ended up putting a futon mattress on the middle of our floor so he wouldn't get hurt. And we would pile pillows up around the TV and everything. He wasn't talking. He wasn't trying to walk or any of that stuff. So it was scary, but we were new parents, so we really didn't know a whole lot. And
there was really no guidance, nobody to step in and say, hey, you need to do this, or because nobody really knew. Once again, that's been said, but there was nothing and nobody to point us in a direction. Yeah. So we was just kind of blindly filling our way through lives.
Yeah, and my mom would go home and she would research, and she would come back at, well, can we try this, or can we, maybe let's ask for this. And she was just amazing in helping. But with that also took her away from the other grandchildren in the family, because she had devoted her. That's the thing about my mom. She loves to help other people. That is just what she does. Whether you want her to or not, she's going to try to help you.
So your dad?
Yeah, and so did my dad. And they, just were always there. And I'm not saying that versus, other people not being there. CJ's mom was not able to be there as much as she would have liked, I'm sure. And CJ kind of needed that support. So, but it wasn't able to be there. So my mom and dad kind of picked up for both of us. Darin, like I said, we were at 2 years old. We got referred to this doctor. So we went in to see the doctor. And the doctor says, take him off of everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with this kid when we take him home? What are we going to feed him? And he was like, he's filled up with yeast from bacteria, from infections and the vaccines and medications. And he's just really, really sick. So take him off everything and give him some yeast medication. We did that. And within 3 months, Darin sat up and butt scooted across the floor. The day that he did that, we knew that diet was going to be a big thing for him. So we continued to go back and forth to this doctor and get advice on, what to feed him, what to do about this, how can we make this, simple but effective. And he would help us with that. And he just kind of supported us too as a young couple, and trying to navigate through this. The doctors at Children's Hospital actually wrote him and told him that he should not be giving me false hope that Darin was going to die. He has the letter. He has the emails. He saved them. He showed them to us.
And realistically, in the end, we all die.
We do. So at that point in time, we're starting to get older with Darin. He was starting to do things, but he still wasn't doing a lot of things. He never, talked. He would make noises. He was vocal, but he wasn't verbal. He was trying to get up on his knees, but he wasn't fully getting there. So we were trying to help support him in getting that done, and it was still kind of really hard.
Turn your fingers, please. Darin. Darin. Look at your tongue. Is that good? Ah. Good job. Cheers. There it goes. He's up. It's got his arms up. And now it's over. See, this is where he started from. Way over here. And he has ended up clear over here. By rolling. Oh, your phone. Say okay, Dad. Stop recording.
So, about 3 or 4, we were trying to get Darin into, you know, the local DDD for, you know, early intervention and therapy and get started for preschool. And during that process, I can't really remember whether it was a therapist we went to or his pediatrician. They were not physically aware of Darin's capabilities. And I believe they were standing him up, and he didn't have braces on at that time because he didn't have braces on his legs. And they were turning him, and he had a fall. And when that happened, we kind of noticed a regression with Darin, a little bit. And there was some screaming and more screaming. Even though we were still dealing with it, it wasn't as bad as it was before.
It wasn't a little bit of a regression, though. Like, everything that he was doing to advance, he stopped doing. That's
okay. See, I don't remember that part. That's why it's good that CJ's here. Like I said, it's a lot of like post-traumatic stress, especially in the first few years, because there was so much.
of the standing and taking steps, because at one time he was doing that and he quit doing that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that he quit doing.
So we ended up starting, you know, preschool, a little later than normal. They had a really great physical therapist over there, but he was not there full time. So I ended up going into the classroom for the first couple of weeks. I'd go in and I'd sit and I'd watch, because after he fell, I was, you know, really protective.
Gun shy. Can't trust anybody.
And I would still get calls when I would leave, like for half a day. You know, Darin's doing this. How do we, you know, we go around this? How do we, you know, adjust to this? Christy Rigsby, it was her first year teaching. And for a first year teacher and being a special needs teacher, she did wonderful in kind of working with me instead of against me as a parent. Because I'm sure no teacher, nobody wants somebody in there hovering over them all the time. But given the scenario, I didn't have a choice. So I was in there every day. We continued along that path, and Darin, he was trying stuff, but he really wasn't making a whole lot of progress. At that point in time, we found out that, you know, the doctor had diagnosed Darin with autism and with celiac disease. So we had to start cooking his food in separate pans. It can't be touched by other foods because it's contaminated. And
all organic diet.
All organic diet. He has to have low sugar. And the way that the doctor explained it to me, if you don't know what celiac disease is, your body cannot digest gluten. And it's not so much that it's a new disease. It's been around for a while. But the problem is that our food is not processed like it used to be. It is genetically modified. So it's not so much Darin's body has a problem with breaking down the food. He has a problem with breaking down the food the way it's made now. So we have to give him a digestive enzyme with lunch and dinner so he can break down his food. Because what was happening, Darin ended up getting so thin because his body was basically eating itself because it wasn't absorbing the nutrients that he needed. So we had to do some education with staff and therapists and stuff on that and why it wasn't okay for him just to eat, you know, food at school or, you know, touch a sandwich and then go feed him and not wash your hands. That's a big deal to him. Darin would also break out in red blotches all over his skin. He had a lot of allergies. I remember yelling at my mom one time because she had the ceiling fan on, and ceiling fans collect dust. And for him, it would just cause him to have a reaction. The hardest thing about Darin in those first few years is he couldn't talk to tell us what was wrong. Somebody asked me, and a nurse in Eric's office, Dr. Eric's office, I call him Dr. Eric, which would I rather have Darin do, walk or talk first? And I would always say talk, because then he could tell me why he wasn't walking. So back to the kidney part of Darin's kidney. Darin's kidney was full of cysts. When they went in to refix his circumcision, they did the ultrasound. They, you know, put dye in his system, which I don't know if that was a great thing or not with him being so little in the first, few months of his life. It probably added to everything, but his kidney was full of cysts and it ended up shrinking. So people live with one kidney all the time, wasn't a big deal. But Darin's feet would also swell. He'd have lymphedema really bad, to the point where you couldn't get a shoe or sock on him. And he has a cyst near his cerebellum in his arachnoid matter. It's called an arachnoid cyst. They said it's not hurting anything, but your cerebellum's your muscle, for your activity control. So there's always that question of whether it really is or not, but not enough for us to put him through a surgery to have a shunt put in, because they won't do it. It's too small. And I'm not going to put him through that. So the screaming started to get less and less. Dr. Eric suggested vitamin B12 injections. When we give Darin those injections, for whatever reason, I don't know, because again, I'm not a doctor, the swelling in his feet goes down. It helps regulate his sleep, and it also helps regulate his bowel movements, which is a big thing. We even had to do, at one point in time, colonics. That's where they put the tube in your bottom and they cycle the water through to clean out your intestines with Darin, because his intestines were so filled with bad bacteria from all the infection and antibiotics and everything. So we had to go through all that in the first 5 years with Darin. See, this is why we're married. CJ's over here making me laugh because he's saying I said, a lot, but it's a long story.
Really, they don't know. That's why you're doing what you're doing.
And it's a long story, and it's a lot. So
if it seems like it bounces around a little bit,
there's certain things that will trigger my memory as I'm talking.
And you got to go to it, or you'll lose it.
So in the beginning, CJ and I were living on a property of my, family's. It ended up, they needed, they needed the property for their kid. They didn't, want us to stay here anymore. So we had to move out. And that was when Darin was 2 and we were going through the thick of it.
And that was kind of a raw deal.
Yeah, we were kind of hard felt about that one.
Middle of the winter.
So we ended up moving in town. We could have never guessed, but we lived like a block from the railroad tracks, which was not a good idea because Darin's extremely sensitive to sound. And it's okay if he's making the noises, but a train or hammering and living in town and you're right on top of other people, not a good idea for Darin. We ended up having to once Darin was, I think, 3 or 4, we ended up getting a bed that was equipped enough that we felt safe that he could sleep on his own, because prior to that, I was always sleeping with him for safety reasons. And we ended up having to put 2 40-gallon fish tanks in his room to drown out the noise from the trains so he could sleep a little better. So that...
And it was something for him to look at and see.
Yeah, and visualize and stuff like that. I mean, it's hard as parents to know there's something wrong with your kid and not be able to fix it, for sure. So I always tell my patients this: if anything in life, no matter it's an illness, a diagnosis, you know, people subject grief is to just somebody dying. But grief affects, the stages of grief affect people that have, you know, lost normalcy of something, or have a new disorder or a disruption of their life. And being young, you don't realize that you do go through a grief process of what normal kids are supposed to look like. So, act like, and where they're supposed to be at in life. And, you know, nobody prepares you to navigate through an unhealthy child, or how to get help, or how to, you know, get care and still work and function. And even going to a grocery store was very anxious and caused a lot of anxiety for me. I would get judged because Darin, we had a pacifier in his mouth for a long time, because if we didn't, he would chew on things that he wasn't supposed to. It wasn't safe. Older people would judge me about that going to the grocery store, if I could even make it into the grocery store, because the noise level in there would be so overwhelming to Darin that sometimes I didn't make it. I had to turn around and walk right back out. Putting him in the baby carrier on a cart at age 3 or 4, got judged about that. He's a little big to be in that, don't you think? Or parking in the handicap space when I didn't have sticker because I had to run in and run right back out. People would judge me on that because, oh, you're not handicapped, he's not handicapped. And then I pull the wheelchair out of the trunk, and then you'd see their jaw drop. So you were always battling something. We still do battle stuff all the time. So that was kind of like the first 5 years of his life. It was lots of screaming, lots of crying, lots of figuring out how to manage the disorders, because we had not just one diagnosis. We had a bunch. We had the chromosome being a ring, the deletion part of it. We had autism. We had celiac disease. We had lymphedema in the legs. We had a right kidney that was full of cysts and shrinking that we had to watch. And we had the cysts on the cerebellum that we had to, you know, watch that too for the first 5 years, along with all the allergies. Darin was allergic to everything. It tanked his immune system. It was so bad. I remember being in the doctor's office and them giving him 3 or 4 shots while giving him a breathing treatment. Now, being a nurse, I know that that is not okay. But you try to trust in your doctors. That's the way we're taught to do. And
I don't trust none of them.
I don't trust any of them now. There's only one I trust.
Yeah, I trust Eric.
We trust Eric, and that's it. And when we go to see Eric, the whole family sees Eric. It's not just Darin anymore. And we'll get into that more. But right now, birth to 5 years, it's a lot. So we'll make another video on the rest. When Darin was 5, we did find out we were pregnant with Allie. So that changed things a lot. So we'll kind of go into that in the next video.
It's another unplanned one, wasn't it?
Yeah. Unplanned pregnancies, just like the rest of America. So, you know.
At least you wasn't a crack whore then.
And at least you were a stand-up gentleman.
Notice I said then. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So, we're going to get back to working on the car today. Sorry I cried on you. It just happens. It's an emotional thing. Like I said, especially when you look back on it and all the things that you remember being through. So, more to come, because I feel like sharing our story, maybe it'll help somebody. If you have any questions, just post them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. There's some things, like I said, I don't remember, but I can try to find the answer for you. or I can tell you, you know, what we've done to help. Now, by that, I'm not recommending it for anybody because you got to do what you got to do. But the things that we do work for us.
Ish.
I don't know.
Not everything works.
We still try to figure things out. There are some things, but
I feel like help these days is a lot easier to get. Because we never did really get a whole lot of help.
Yeah. From
any kind of government aids or anything, and now I hear of everybody. I mean, they just hand it out. So yeah,
it was when we were younger. It was always we made too much money to get help, but then people
broke as fuck.
Yeah, and then you see somebody broke getting, you know, brand new equipment, money, cars with lifts in them and everything else. So maybe we're just not smart enough to navigate the system, or we just didn't have the right person to send us to the right place.
That's how I learned how to make something out of nothing. I build junk ass cars and go have fun.
Yeah, so more of that to come. But like I said, this is birth to the first 5 years. There is a lot more in the next few videos, so just stay tuned.